Kirsty Lee Akers is the only artist in history to have won three of the major prizes in Australian country music: Toyota Star Maker, Telstra Discovery, and a Golden Guitar. And she's done it with a combination of great songs and high energy live performance. Her most recent album, Wild, took the #1 spot on the ARIA Country chart. It was the fourth highest selling country record in 2022 and received two Golden Guitar nominations. Kirsty has also launched a new band, Rhinestoned, and she's performing at the Gympie Music Muster with Rhinestoned, as well as under her own name. So she has a bit going on, and we're going to talk about it. Hello, Kirsty.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm very pleased to have the chance to talk to you because you've had this incredible career. There's chart positions everywhere. There are songs and albums. I know you've also produced your own music, which I
Yeah,
find so interesting. But I did want to start at the very beginning because you first performed in public at the age of 3.
I
What
did.
did you sing?
The very first song I sang was called "You." Well, I say it's called, but you're gonna know it. "You Are My Sunshine." Everybody knows that song. But I come from a musical family, so I didn't really know any different. My mum and my nan and my some of my aunties, they all sang country music, and so I just continued on doing what they were already doing. My mum and her sisters were going in competitions with each other, and because my mum was quite young as well, she was only 16 when she fell pregnant with me. She was still pretty much a kid herself and doing the talent quest circuit when I came along. So of course I just didn't know any different. I just wanted to join them on stage. So it started out, mum would stand at the side of the stage and sing the song along with me so I could hear, where to come in with the band, because I was singing with a full band. And then it wasn't much long after that I was like, okay, go away now, mum. I can do this by myself.
For a small child to sing with a full band, though, that's you've
Yeah.
got to, it's not only about the vocal power, but you've got to have that presence. And I know little kids are very
Yeah.
much in the moment, but still, it's a big deal to do that.
Well, definitely, and it's only now that I'm older and I watch back videos and I realize it is quite a big deal. And being a singing teacher myself as well for the past sort of nearly 20 years, I've had hundreds of students over the years, and it is a hard thing to do to sing with a band. So I just look at that little like 3 and 4 year old and think, that's crazy. But I just didn't know any different, because I literally, even though I didn't sing in public until I was 3 years old, I was singing, from the time I could talk at home. And
Yeah.
I just thought it was normal that every family get together, we would sing songs and do all that kind of thing. And it wasn't until I started school that I realized, okay, maybe we're not quite normal.
You're normal for you, I think is the way.
Yeah.
I'm interested in your mum competing with her sisters, though. Did that mean
Yeah.
that they had that kind of competitive
Oh,
relationship all the
100%.
time?
They still
Right.
they still do. It's hilarious to watch. And because they're all close in age as well, she's one of 5 girls. So you can imagine what it was like. But they would also go in, duos together in the duo section, and sing together as well. So I think when I came along, it was obviously a totally different dynamic as well, because that kind of competitiveness kind of had to get pushed to the side so that they can then nurture me. But it was a really great way to grow up.
Did they perhaps they competed over who could nurture you the best?
I think there might have been some of that along the way. My auntie will often, because my mum doesn't play guitar, so my auntie will often argue that she taught me everything, but my mum will argue that it was her that taught me everything. So when you get to them together, and it was funny because we recently did an article for Women's Day, and they came to my house, and my auntie and my mum was here, and they did a big story. And the guy interviewing, the poor thing, he couldn't get a word in over my mum and my auntie, because they were just, and every time he'd ask them, where did she get her talent from? Straight away, one of them would like chime in and say it was her, or no, it was me. It was funny to watch. So I just
Well,
sat back and let them talk.
well, that's it's lovely that they like to lay claim to you. But did you keep doing that sort of like competing, anything like that as you were growing up? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So I was pretty much, well, I call a talent quest kid. There was a few of us in country music. So I grew up with people like Travis Collins and the McClymonts. They were two that sort of really, I knew from a very young age. So probably from about 7 years old, I was competing against those guys in talent quest. And we'd always meet up different weekends around different talent quests around Australia. And we were so lucky back then that there were so many of those country music clubs, and there was talent quests that nurtured young talent. I don't feel like there's as many these
Mhm.
days, but that was a totally normal thing to do. Was most weekends pack up in the car and go to a talent quest, and so yeah, I literally did that up until I was 16, because then well, it's still a talent quest, was back then it was called the Telstra Road to Tamworth, and that won me a trip to Nashville, and that was the first time I got to go to Nashville. I'd never even been on a plane before, let alone left the country. So from there, after that, the following year, then I went in Star Maker, which is of course another talent quest. And so I often say I literally am a talent quest kid from the age of 3 years old, and lots of the amazing things I've been able to achieve have come from doing competitions.
When I interviewed Emma Donovan a little while ago, she said she was on that circuit with Brooke
Yeah.
McCon in particular. And she's like, she said her mother was very much the stage.
Yeah. Definitely.
So I love the idea of these mums kind of running around, and also, as you said, the way the talent was fostered through those country music clubs. That's
Yeah.
hugely important to how our country music landscape looks now.
Definitely, 100%, yeah.
So I'm wondering if there was an age at which you realized that it was like serious competition. It wasn't necessarily fun anymore, or did you always find it fun to compete?
Well, I always found it fun, and I mean, I lost way more talent quests than what I ever won. But I feel like growing up, I didn't really think about anything other than music because that's just all I ever wanted to do. And I grew up going to Tamworth every year, and we would watch Star Maker or we'd listen to it on the radio. So the idea of competitions, I guess, was just so totally normal for me. And I knew that because I come from a family with zero money at all, I knew that that was going to be my way out or my way in to the industry. So yeah, I didn't really think anything of it. It wasn't one of those things where it was like, oh, I don't want to do a talent quest this weekend. It was more me saying to mum and dad, okay, you need to save up this month because there's this talent quest in Queensland and I need you to take me there.
Yeah.
So I feel like it was always fun for me. I didn't really, even though I did take it seriously because I knew, certain talent quests had great prizes and that could get me into the next step in my career. It was just so much fun at the same time. And I feel like because there was so many young kids around my age, like, the McClymonts and Travis and so many more that I'm not listing right now, but it was kind of fun because even though you're competing against each other, it was a whole weekend where you just literally hang out and play country music. And for me, especially where I grew up, and I feel like it was Australia-wide, country music was not cool at all growing up in Australia in the early 90s. So I didn't have any friends at school that I could, talk about country music to or listen to country music. I felt like I was literally the only person in my school that loved country music. So when I got to do these talent quests on the weekend, it was amazing to see other kids my age that felt the same way about me and loved the same music.
Mm-hmm. And then what I understand, you were also busking during the Tamworth Country Music Festival because you saved enough money to make your own EP. So did you enjoy the busking part of it?
Yeah, when I started that very young as well, I think we've got the first paper clipping was I was like 4 years old busking in the Peel Street in Tamworth at the festival. We would go every year, and because my mum grew up, singing country music her whole life, she went to Tamworth every year of her life as well with her family. So um, she's been to nearly every festival, since she was a kid, and I've been to about, I think, at least 34 festivals. I think there was one year that mum and dad made us stay at home with an auntie and uncle, and we hated it because they wanted to experience a festival kid free. And we whinged so much that they never left us back home again. But mum and dad would actually take me around to well-established buskers in the main street and ask if, could my daughter get up and sing a couple of songs with you? And they'd let me, and we'd put my hat out and collect money, and mum would make me bank all that money, which I hated because obviously I wanted to just go and spend it and waste it on lollies and all that sort of stuff. But mum would make me save it. And then, by the time I turned 16, I had enough money there to record my very first EP.
So making that decision, because obviously you've been performing for years, recording is a different deal. And I imagine there was possibly there was some thinking of, well, it's good to have something to give to people to take away with them. Was that the main reason that you made it? Was like, okay, this is an artifact that an audience member can take away with them?
Yeah, definitely. Because I was doing, proper full band gigs by the time I was 14, and did like my very first tour, like without my parents. I think about it now and I think, oh my God, they let their 16-year-old daughter just go on tour with band to South Australia. Like, just didn't think anything of it at the time. So I would go and do gigs, and people would constantly ask me, do you have an album, or do you have
Right.
something that we can buy? So it just became out of necessity, I guess. But it was also great too, because then you could make a little bit more money at each gig selling them, and yeah, so it was great to. Well, I listen back to it now and I think, okay, I hope that little first EP never sees the light of day again. But I say that, but it was amazing for what it was at the time, because
Mm.
I had people like Stewie French play on it, Michelle Rose, Ian Lees. So it was a really great recording, but obviously, it had my songs on there that I started writing when I was like 14 years old, about the boy that broke my heart at school and things like that. So, um, but yeah, it was great to have a product from such a young age that I could then, go and sell at shows and at festivals and things like that as well.
Yeah. So you touring at the age of 16 with the band, obviously that's a band you put together. So how did you pick who to put in that band?
Well, the very first tour I did was actually with an artist named Albie Poole, and he was someone that really championed young talent back in the early 2000s. I grew up in a town called Curry Curry, which is in the Hunter Valley, and we used to have this thing called the Horseshoe Bend Roundup every Wednesday night, and it started out in a town called Maitland, at a club called the Tin Hut, and it was Albie Poole, Rob Wilson, and Bruce McCumsky. They put on this night of, they would play with a band, and then eventually they started seeing people like me rock up and ask if I could get up and sing, and then there started to be just this group of young people that would come along every week, and so eventually they allowed all of us to get up and sing every single week. We'd only sing like 1 or 2 songs each, but then that went on for like a good at least 5 years, and that's where I really honed my skills of performing in front of an audience every week and with a live band. And so that very first tour I did was with Albie Poole over to South Australia. We played at a festival over there, so I went over with him and his band, and it was amazing. It was just, it was so unknown for my friends at school, because they just thought that was so strange that they're going to school and I'm like, oh, see you guys, I've got to go on tour for 2 weeks to South Australia, and they're probably looking at each other going, what the?
But also, like, you've been working from a young age. If you think of,
Yeah,
I often think of learning a musical instrument and voice is the same as being like a kid job. Sort of,
yeah,
you assign kids to the work, and it's instead of
yeah,
sending them down the salt mines, they're
yeah,
twirling away at their scales. And for you, that was work, obviously.
yeah.
But from the way you're talking about it, because you look so energized by it, obviously it was also just fun
Oh,
and
definitely.
creative flow. Yeah.
It was. I never ever thought about it as work, and still to this day, I never ever think about, and I probably should think about the money side of music, because it is my job. Because I know that if something came along and I was told, okay, you're never going to earn a cent from music ever again, I know 100% I would still do what I'm doing, because I just live and breathe music, and especially country music, so much. I've never ever thought of it as a job, even though it is. And I feel like probably that's why I've been a bit of an entrepreneur my whole life, and always tried to have like a side deal going, so that I could make sure that no matter what, I'd always have an income and still be able to do music and not have to take really crappy gigs just to pay the bills, and have to turn down gigs because they're not paying as much money as I want or whatever. So yeah, it's funny you mention that, because because it's such a part of me. I feel like as a human being, like I honestly don't know how I would exist without music. I was watching the Celine Dion documentary not long ago, where she's lost her voice, and I just thought that would honestly be my worst nightmare, because it's such a part of me my whole life. I honestly don't know what I would do, and so watching it was heartbreaking, and I could feel how she feels, even though I'm lucky I don't have anything like that, but I can
Mhm.
only imagine how she feels going through that. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember reading ages ago, Julie Andrews from The Sound of Music and many other
Yeah.
things had vocal surgery and then couldn't sing anymore. And
Yeah.
she was reporting a similar thing. Just,
Yeah.
I suppose that it seems to me that you have existed pretty much in creative flow since you were 3, basically.
Yeah.
So you got up and it's just been one long flow
Yeah.
since then.
100%. And I've got like, the whole big folder of paper clippings when I was a kid, because I was always that kid that was in Talent Quest, and my local town was always so supportive, and whenever I'd win a big competition, they'd put a story in the paper and they'd always ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? And every single article I'd say, I want to be a country singer. There's nothing else. And even though I went to year 12, I remember, when we were in year 11 and 12 and we had to choose our subjects that we wanted. Back then it was called a UAI to get into university. You choose the subjects that are going to give you the best UAI to get in university. And I was like, I'm not going to, I'm just here to socialize in between doing gigs. So I don't need any of that. So I'm just going to pick the funnest subjects, drama and music and all those creative ones that won't even get me a UAI. I don't care, because I'm not going to university. So it was just always, it was just no other option in my mind. It was just, I'm always going to do music and do whatever I had to do to be able to do that.
Like you say, I was there to socialize between gigs because
Yeah.
I'm already working, and the whole purpose of
Right.
school is basically to get me in the workforce, and I'm already there.
100%. I remember getting called up to the office one day, and the careers advisor was explaining to me that I'd had 22 absences already that term and wanted to know why. I said, well, I was at the Gympie Muster on that one, and that one I was at this festival, and then I was touring here. So I'm very lucky I had supportive parents in that way, where they weren't the kind of parents that, would force me into doing something that they knew I was never going to do. So they always supported me doing music, and if it meant I had to take a month off school, then so be it.
And also, your mother led you into this.
100%, it's their fault.
So you're talking about being a singer, but of course you are also a songwriter, and you mentioned Telstra Road to Tamworth and winning that trip to Nashville. And you did spend quite a bit of time in Nashville just over a decade ago writing songs, and you have had accolades for your songwriting. So I'm wondering if you now think of yourself as primarily still a singer, or as a songwriter, or as a singer-songwriter.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I think if I could choose my absolute dream job, it would probably be, if I had to choose just one thing to do, it would be to be a songwriter, because I really enjoy that process the most, the songwriting. And you can do it from anywhere in the world, you can, doesn't matter if you're in lockdowns and it's COVID or whatever, you can still do your job as a songwriter. It doesn't matter where you are. And I've always really loved the process of creating the song. And I feel like that came from that first trip to Nashville, because up until then, I'd only ever written songs by myself. I'd never co-written a song in my life. I'd always just sat in my bedroom with my guitar and written songs. And so I really got thrown in the deep end when I got sent over there. As I said, I'd never even been on a plane before, let alone left the country. So to get off the plane over there at 18 years old, and I literally got thrown in the deep end. The first day I got sent to Universal Publishing, and I think the first person I wrote with was a guy called Byron Hill, and he's written hits for everyone you can think of, like Loretta Lynn, Reba. He's written for George Strait, and we hit it off so amazingly. And I feel like that kind of set me up to think, oh, this is amazing. Every co-writing session is going to be like this, which obviously I learned, no, you're not going to hit it off that well with everyone, but I'm so lucky that very first songwriting session was so amazing, and we did hit it off, and we wrote a great song. And that was back in 2006, and I still write with Byron now to this day. I'm going over in a month's time to write with Byron again. So it's yeah, I really love songwriting, and it really holds a special place in my heart. And I guess as a kid too, I always wrote songs. Even before I could play guitar, they weren't great songs or anything like that, but I guess it's kind of therapy, and especially was when I was a kid, whatever I was going through or whatever, I'd write about it. Every single situation I've had in my life, I've always written songs about it, or even if my friends or family are going through situations, I've written songs about it. So yeah, I feel like as much as I do love performing and love touring and all that sort of thing, I feel like if I had to choose just one thing to do for the rest of my life, it would be songwriting.
So that relationship with Byron is a really long collaboration. So
Yeah.
obviously you treat each other well, otherwise you wouldn't be in touch. But I'm wondering what you feel he brings out in you as a songwriter that's worked all this time.
Oh, good question. I have a few songwriters like that. Another one is Trey Bruce. He's an amazing songwriter. Same thing again. He's written some of the biggest hits for people like Randy Travis and Carrie Underwood. And I actually met him in Australia. He got sent over here for a songwriting sort of week workshop with a bunch of Aussie artists, and we hit it off at that event, and we've been writing ever since. That was back in 2007. And I feel like you sort of come across people like that, you know, not every single day in your career, but when you do, a lot of it comes down to just, you know, if you weren't songwriting, you would probably be really great friends just to hang out with. I feel like I find writing with people like that is easiest for me, because one, they obviously get you as a person, and there's nothing worse than sitting in a room with someone that you can't stand and trying to write a song. And I've been there, don't worry. And I've left those sessions and gone, oh my God, never again, never again. But so I feel like when you do hit it off with someone so well, you try and hold on to those people and keep those relationships going, because they always seem to create the best material.
At the time you went over to Nashville at 18, from what I understand, you were signed to a major label around the same time. And since then, you've been an independent artist. So obviously these songwriting relationships you're making are for you. Like it's
Yeah.
no one organizing them for you. So I'm interested in when you decided to become independent, if that was a scary decision or it just seemed like a logical thing at that point in time.
It definitely was scary, but I think also at the same time, because I was signed so young, I felt like my first two albums, they were with a major label, they weren't 100% me. And even when you go back and listen to them, I was doing so much songwriting, but my very first album, I don't even, I think it might have had one of my songs on there. And that wasn't my choice, but because I was young and naive, you just do what you think is right, and until you eventually get your own voice. So it wasn't until after, you know, I'd done my first two albums and I thought, okay, this isn't, I'm wanting to go in a different direction, and if that's not going to be supported, then I'm just going to go out and do it independently. And I feel like I finally, yeah, got to an age where I felt like I could voice my, you know, my opinion and what I wanted and what I wanted something to sound like. So doing it independently, even though it was scary because you have no one else to fall back on when it's, you know, independent, it was also exciting because I was excited to do something that was 100% totally me.
And it also obviously meant that you could start producing because you have
Yeah.
produced a lot of your own music. So what aspects of that role do you like?
Well, I've done my past two albums now, and it was something I'd always wanted to do. But as I said earlier, you know, you get to an age where you finally find your voice and you feel comfortable enough to make decisions yourself, and you're not second guessing yourself. And I feel like the same thing happened with producing. I always wanted to produce, but I just wasn't confident enough up until that point to feel like, okay, yes, I can take the reins and I can make all the decisions and it's going to turn out okay. So that taking that first leap and producing my Under My Skin album, so that was two albums ago. Um, when I did that, I actually made sure that I used my band who I play with on the road all the time. That was the first time I'd used them on an album, because normally when I'd done albums before, it was with other producers and they'd bring in, you know, studio session players. And of course, I always felt like it wasn't 100% me, because I feel like my band, who I've played with for so long, my guitarist Dan, who's a member of my new trio, he's been my guitarist for about 12 years now. They get my sound the most. And so I made sure when I did step into the producer's seat that I had those guys playing on the album. So it was so much more comfortable and so much easier to direct them as well, because they're so used to working with me, and it wasn't like I was bringing in strangers and, you know, saying do this and do that. So yeah, it was a really great experience, even though it was scary to take the leap. And then of course after that I was like, well, of course I'm just going to produce every album now, because I'm a control freak. And but
So you know what you're doing.
yeah, yeah, so I did do the following album after that, and I feel like from now on it'd be really hard to not at least take a co-producing seat on albums, because I feel like I am at an age now and have the amount of experience I do, that I am finally at a point where I really know, obviously I feel like I know my sound the best than anybody else. So I feel like if I have that skill there, then at least I should at least be co-producing. But I'm definitely open to working and collaborating with other producers, because they, you know, even when it comes to songwriting, I might write a song by myself, but I always notice when, if I start out with an idea and I take it to another writer to finish it with, it always, most times will end up being better than what I would think of by myself, because you just have another person's perspective. And the same goes with producing. having someone else to bounce ideas off is really great. So yeah, my last couple of tracks I've actually been co-producing with my drummer Paul Bain, so it's been really great working with him as well. So he's played on my past 2 albums, and now he's co-producing with me.
So look, you have a long history there of making things and collaborating with others, which is my segue to talk about the block.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people would have heard about you for the first time when you
Yeah.
and Jessie were on the block. Was it overall a good or a bad experience?
It was an amazing experience. It honestly was. It was life-changing. It was the hardest experience of our life. And it's so funny. People will often say to us, "Did you have fun on the block?" And we say, "Hell no. That is not my idea of fun. It was hell on earth." If you want to picture hell on earth, picture a reality TV show where you're filming every single day for 3 months straight, hardly eating, no sleep every night, and you've got it. So it was amazing. It was life-changing. And of course, it introduced a lot of new people to my music. But it honestly was, yeah, the hardest thing we've ever done and probably will ever do. So people often say to us, "Would you ever do the block again?" And we say, secretly, we hope they never ask us so we don't have to
Make the decision,
make that
yeah.
decision. But at the same time, it'd be very hard to turn down. But at the same time, we hope they never ask.
It
So,
obviously didn't put you off home renovation because from what I understand, you've done
I
some more
know.
since then.
I know, we're suckers for punishment. And it's funny because we went in to this renovation thinking, okay, we built an amazing house in 3 months on the block. Surely we can do ours in 6 months. And 2 years later, we're still going because unfortunately we don't have Scotty Cam rocking up every week with an extra $10,000 or extra builders to help us out. So it's just us doing this one. So even though I say the block was the hardest thing we've ever done, this house we're doing right now is probably the hardest thing we've ever done because it's literally just us, just Jessie and I. So, and we're down to the very pointy end of the budget now. So we're on Marketplace looking for building materials and all that kind of thing. And anyone that has driven past our house or they've seen it in photos, our driveway is like this. So it just makes every
Uh,
job 100 times harder.
but clearly, after the block and this home renovation, you and Jessie are still talking to each other because you
Yeah.
are at Rhinestone together
Yeah.
with Dan Ells, as you mentioned. Now, it is a great band name. As soon as I heard, I was like,
Thank
oh,
you.
that is very, very good. But why did you decide to start that project?
Well, Dan and I had always talked about it, and I'm going to be 100% honest. The very the very number one reason why we wanted to start something was we were so sick of the limited opportunities for solo female artists in
Oh,
country music.
interesting. Okay.
And we would often say, I betcha if we put 2 guys either side of me, we'll get offered so many more gigs. And honestly, that was one of the very first reasons we wanted to do it because there was just so many limited opportunities for female artists, and we wanted to have another avenue where we could say, okay, well, if you don't want to book a female artist, how about booking this act? It has got a female artist in it. I'm still the lead singer and writing the songs and doing all of that, but I have 2 guys either side of me, and it's our point was proven. 100% it was proven.
Right. So this, are you talking about festivals?
Festivals, yeah, definitely festivals. But even it's so funny because even though I remember our very first single we released, I wrote the song, I produced it. I originally was thinking about putting it on my album, but I held it off and I thought it's probably a little bit too country rock for what the rest of the album is. So I kind of just had it sitting there. And then when we decided to do Rhinestone, we said, okay, well, how about this song? It sounds amazing. Let's redo it with Jessie and Dan on it as well. And I remember my own brother said to me, I don't know what it is. Like, I love your music, of course, but I just love Rhinestone so much more. And I was like, you're an idiot. I'm like, I
I
still
wrote
wrote
that
the song.
song.
I produced it. I wrote it. I'm still singing it. But I don't know what it is. I feel like there's this thing where a lot of people, they don't even realize they're doing it, but they just don't like female. They just tell themselves they don't like female country music or female artists. And so that's just implanted in their brain. They don't even realize it. So yeah, so to be 100% honest, that's why we first decided to do it. But of course, it's something we'd always talked about doing because Dan and I had worked together for so long, and we really wanted to have something where we both grew up on 90s country music, and we wanted to have something where we could just do a whole set of, great 90s covers if we wanted to, because that's not something I really do in my thing when I'm doing ticketed shows or playing festivals. I might throw one covering my set, but I'm not getting up there and playing a whole set of covers. So
Mhm.
that was the other way it came about. And we'd always talked about it being a trio, and we were talking and we're like, who are we going to ask to do it? And we originally were talking about our drummer, but he was on tour with a lot of other artists, and so his schedule was way too busy. And we were like, okay, the only other person that we really both like is Jessie. And Jessie had always jammed out with us backstage and at home, but he's such a shy guy, Jessie, and a lot of people don't realize how talented he is. He comes from the same sort of background as me. He was never a Talent Quest kid, but his dad was in a country band back in the day, and his dad's band was signed to EMI, and they toured with people like John Williamson, and they would play at Tamworth every year. So Jesse was the kid in the audience watching his dad on stage, but never ever would get on stage or do anything like that. But he had like the whole music room at home with instruments where he was always playing and jamming out, and as I said, playing with Dan and I at home and backstage, but he just never had that confidence to get up on stage. And it's one of the great things about the block is it really did bring him out of his shell a lot. He still is a very shy guy and would much prefer to be behind the camera, not in front of it. But it brought him out of his shell a lot and gave him that confidence that when we brought up the idea, he looked a bit scared to start off with, but then he was like, yeah, okay. And we were like, oh, we were so shocked. We thought we were going to have to bribe him with a lot more alcohol than what we did. But he seemed pretty keen. And so we just got to work straight away and started, writing together and recording stuff. And because we get along so well, like we've just worked together for so long now, it just really, it's no effort. Like there's no effort at all. And we love the same music. We grew up listening to the same music. So it's a really fun project for me. Like when I do get really frustrated about when I see a festival lineup and, there might be two female artists and there's 20 male artists, getting frustrated about that. I'm glad I have this side project to not have to worry about any of that. And it doesn't matter if we don't win a golden guitar or if we don't have a #1 record or whatever, because we're literally just doing it for the fun of it. And if it's successful, that's great. And if not, then, it's not as heartbreaking as if it would be if it was my solo career.
It's interesting you were saying that about like female artists, because when I heard your cover of Rhinestoned Cowboy, which is your
Yeah.
very recent release for you, I was like, where's Kirsty? Like the voice starts singing, I'm thinking, what is it?
I
I want her voice.
I know. Well, so many people kept saying, do the boys sing? Do the boys sing? And I'm like, well, of course they sing. They're not just standing here for decoration. So when we did this song, I was like, I think you guys need to open it just so people will stop asking, do you guys sing? Because obviously you sing. But so that was the whole reason we did that. And I think it works well. I obviously come in and take over the rest of the song after the first chorus, but it's good that people have been able to, we get like a verse each and we get to all showcase in it rather than just me.
Well, I am frustrated that that's had to be the reason why you started it, but it is a great name. It is a great name for a band, and you are obviously great at names because your most recent solo single is "Girls Are Why the West Is Wild." And again, when I heard that, I thought that I really like that, and it's got a good rhythm to it for a chorus line as well. So, do you actually put a bit of time into naming things?
Yeah, definitely. Rhinestone, we put a lot of time into that. We went back and forward so many times with different names, and then we'd have a name, and then we'd find out that some obscure band in some town that no one's ever heard of had the same name, and we'd be like, oh, go back to the drawing board. And anyone that knows me knows I'm a huge, huge Dolly Parton fan, and she had a movie called Rhinestone with Sylvester Stallone back in the day. And that was like sort of one that was on the list, but then we had a friend that actually suggested the name as well, and we were just like, okay, well that's really strange because that's been one of our names on the list, and then they've suggested it as well. So I feel like that's what the name should be, and it was the first name too that we all agreed on and we all really loved, so it just seemed to really fall into place easily.
Well, both Rhinestone and you, as Kirsty Lee Akers, will be at the Gympie Music Muster. Now, you mentioned earlier playing Gympie when you were a very small person. So when was your first ever Gympie?
Well, I started going to Gympie as a fan before actually playing because I would go in the talent quest there. So I think maybe my first Gympie, I was about 14 maybe, and went in the talent quest there. and then we would go every year. But my very first time playing was the year I won Star Maker, and I actually launched my album, my first album there at Gympie on the main stage. So that was 2007. So it holds a special place in my heart, Gympie, because that was my very first time playing the festival, let alone playing main stage, which was crazy. And of course, being able to do my album launch there at the festival too was really special. So I feel like I'm probably going to bring out a couple of those songs from my very first album and do them at the festival, because it'd be like an anniversary sort of thing. So I'm looking forward to it.
So in terms of managing your time, I'm hoping they've given you some breaks between having to do both.
Yeah, so I think I'm on the Saturday night and Rhinestone's on the Sunday. So yeah.
Is it a different mindset or like energy set between the two shows? Because even though it's you in both and you have a prominent role in Rhinestoned, it's different energy.
It definitely is. I feel like because my stuff, I've got 6 albums out now, so I have a lot of, well, I don't want to say hits because that makes me feel like a douchebag, but a lot of songs.
If it's true, Kirsty, you got to say it. You've got to own it.
A lot of my songs to choose from. It's actually hard to fit them all into an hour set. I put a post up the other day asking what do people want to hear in an hour set, because when you do have 6 albums and if you release 6 or so singles from each album, it's hard to fit them all into a set. And then if you want to throw a cover in or whatever, so the energy is very different because we have obviously my songs that we do, and Dan, my guitarist, he will purposely sort of step back in my stuff, and he's not the showy guitarist that he is in Rhinestone. So he really sort of steps back. And when we first started Rhinestone, I had to keep saying to him, "You're a member of this band, Dan. You need to be. Don't keep holding back. You need to be you need to be showing off your skills. You need to be coming up the front and doing your thing." So because I feel like when I do my solo stuff, he doesn't want to outshine me or whatever. So he steps back and does his thing. But in Rhinestone, he really lets rip, which I really love seeing, because he really is just an amazing guitarist. Anyone that hears him play just says, "Oh my God, where did this guy come from?" Yeah. So I really love that he gets to really rip when we do our Rhinestone stuff, and it's got a lot of energy. And as I said, we grew up listening to a lot of 90s country, so we love to do a bunch of those sort of songs that we grew up listening to, and they're always songs, they're just timeless songs. I feel like 90s country is really timeless, and there were so many big breakout artists, like your Garth Brooks and Dunn and people like that had such big hits that are still such big songs today. So it's good to be able to do that, because as I said, with my solo stuff, I don't really get up and do all covers. I might do one or whatever through a set, but I do all my songs. So it's really great to then be able to do my stuff and then have our really fun sort of thing where we do all our favorite songs we grew up listening to.
Well, it sounds like both sets will be lots of fun, and the good thing is people can come to both of them because you won't be doing the same material, and both
totally different songs at both sets.
Quite different. So given that you are releasing singles with both projects, solo project and Rhinestone, what do you have planned next?
So I have a Kirsty Lee Akers song coming out. I'm hoping to release it what's the date? I don't even know what date it is. What date?
Start of August.
So I'll release it next month. So we're all heading over to Nashville for all of September, myself and Rhinestone. So we'll go over for Americana Fest, and it's going to be the first time that the 3 of us have all been there together at the same time. So really looking forward to that and doing some shows over there. So I'll release a single, a Kirsty Lee Akers single, when we're over in Nashville. So that'll come out next month, which I'm really excited about. We try and never have Rhinestone music out at the same time as my stuff, and vice versa. So it's really good because, a lot of artists these days, they're pumping out singles every 3 months because of the streaming world, and that's what you got to do. So it is good to, 1 month I'll be focusing on promoting Rhinestone stuff, and then once that sort of died down, then I can start promoting my new song, and then it just goes on forever and ever.
I think, looping back to something I said earlier, you exist in creative flow and have from a very young age.
Yeah.
Well, I could keep talking to you for ages because I think there's a whole lot more to say. I have had you talking for a really long time, so I will let you go. But it's been so interesting to talk to you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.